Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Sansad TV. I'm Vikram Chandra, and we're here doing some very special interviews with the people behind the budget, behind economic policy, behind taxation, trying to really get a sense of what was behind the interim budget and also what the broader philosophies are behind the economic policies that we are seeing. And now it's a privilege to have with us Mr. Nitin Gupta, the chairman of CBDT, and Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, the chairman of CBIC, that's direct tax and indirect tax, in case any of you weren't sure of the exact difference on that. It's always great to be speaking to the chairman of CBDT and CBIC. And of course, this particular budget, there's one question that I can't really ask you, which is to explain the tax changes and the tax slab changes. So that question goes a little bit out of the window. Is this, you think, a good thing that tax slab should not be moving in an interim budget? Presumably, there may be something that will happen later.
Stability is the main factor as of now, and the changes were made in the last budget so far as the new tax regime was concerned. So stability continues for the time being.
For the time being, even in indirect taxes, it's increasingly happening. So it's not, this is the interim budget, so there will not be tax changes. But even otherwise, it seems that there is a measure of stability. I remember budgets 15, 20 years ago when everyone was looking and saying what stock is going to go up, what stock is going to go down. But now the philosophy seems to be, don't change it unless you really have to.
Yeah, in direct tax side also, earlier there used to be changes in customs duties, central excise duty. But now, after introduction of GST, the tax rates in GST are done as per the recommendation of GST Council, and that is an exercise which happen over a period of time in the whole year. On custom side also, the idea is to keep the rates stable, and unless there is some government scheme is there like phase manufacturing program, then the rates are tweaked so that it can encourage phase manufacturing program in the country, in the program of Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. Apart from that, rates are not generally touched. On central excise side also, the rates was last touched in May 2022, when there was a drastic reduction was made in the rate of central excise duty on petrol and diesel. On petrol, it was reduced by 8 rupees a litre. On diesel, it was reduced by 6 rupees a litre. Apart from that, on petrol, diesel and crude oil, there is windfall tax which is levied, but that is again linked to international prices of crude oil.
Right. There was a very interesting change that was made just a day or two ago when, on imports of components for electronic manufacturing, those custom duties were reduced. That presumably is to encourage that entire sector and make sure that the manufacturing of electronics happens.
I will give you the background for issuance of that notification. In case of mobile phones, that is covered under phase manufacturing program. And in fact, due to that program, now India is the second largest manufacturing hub for mobile phones. And in that, duty structure was such that there were certain disputes which were arising on mobile parts of particular nature. We call that mechanics and die cut parts. So that was creating some kind of uncertainty for the manufacturing sector. So in the exercise of rate rationalization, that rate of duty has now been equalized. Earlier it used to attract 15%, now it has been made 10% for all sorts of parts. So that is basically a rate rationalization exercise and nothing to do with the budget.
Okay, so rationalization measure as part of that. Now, if I could just turn to one of the most obvious things that strikes you when you're looking at direct taxation, it's of course the buoyancy that we are seeing. And in particular, the numbers that are coming on personal income tax, not just in the last couple of years, but also looking ahead. It's almost dramatic to see the levels of personal income tax that is now being coming forward. What's the reason for that? A lot more people being compliant? Is it better technology? All of the above?
You have rightly answered as well. The buoyancy on the corporate side is very limited, especially after 2019, and because the rate was reduced for the corporates to switch over to 22% or 15%. Having said that, as of now, for the current year, the corporate is growing at around 12 to 13%, while the personal income tax is around 25-26%. So, the buoyancy is quite visible in the PIT side, primarily because of host of factors. One is the use of technology, because there was lot of leakage. The AIS, which you now see, contains lot of information, financial data about the taxpayer, which now taxpayer is aware. It is a nudging exercise, and the taxpayer is aware that the tax department is having the data. So, I should file the return of income correctly. Lot of measures have been taken, which were the loopholes where the leakage of revenue was there, citing the legal loopholes. Those have been curtailed over a period of time, and there is a better trust between the taxpayer and the department now. That is also probably affecting the taxpayer behavior in terms of the compliance levels and disclosing the rightful income. We are, because of the data which is available to us, we have the data about the investments made. So, we compare the data of investments made with the whether the person is filing the return, and for non-filers we issue notices. So, the taxpayer gets notices otherwise, though he is a non-filer. Likewise, we are using the data for other purposes, for higher risk, better risk analysis, and covering those tax cases for the purposes of scrutiny, though these scrutiny is very limited, about 1 lakh cases out of 9 crore returns which are filed around. So, that is the level where we are. So, all these factors are contributing to deepening as well as widening, because more taxpayers are there. Current year 9% more taxpayers have filed the return of income. So, I think
you used a very interesting word. You said nudged, and that seems to be the approach. For example, those SMSs that people get just before New Year's Eve,
yes,
to say, are you sure you filed the right income tax? We are getting something not correct. You have a couple of days to fix it. There used to be a time, and perhaps all through human history, tax collection has been about a danda, right? You stand there and you say, what are you doing? The approach of saying, we know what the facts are, we have
right,
the full data, we have all the information, you can't really escape, so we suggest politely and respectfully that you pay your taxes. That approach seems to be working better than the danda did.
Yes, definitely. But enforcement also plays an important role, and enforcement, you are aware that we are taking all measures available under the statute, and certain cases are well known. In the month of December, we had a huge cache of cash at one particular place, and that cash amount which we seized was 352 crore cash, hard cash.
I want to know how you counted all of that, also those visuals. Which
it took 10 days to count, and after setting up a whole new machines had to be procured from the RBI with a request to RBI, and setting up the entire chain of activities.
So nudge the majority of taxpayers, trust the majority that the majority of taxpayers are honest, and if you treat them and you make it easy for them to pay their taxes, they will probably tax. Have the stick ready for people who are egregious violators and come and hit them on the head with it. Would that be a fair summary of?
Yes, that is a fair summary, and we have provided litigation-free environment. Like I would like to talk about a scheme which we have launched, is e-verification scheme, where we compare the return of income vis-a-vis the data which is available to us, and then tell the taxpayer electronically. It is the entire electronic exercise. And tell the taxpayer electronically that the difference, please explain the difference, and we analyze the difference, and at certain stage we come out, and even the taxpayer comes out that yes, there is an error, and so we have come up with an updated return scheme, where the first is the regular return, then the revised return, which one can file up to 31st December, could have filed, and then the updated return starts, where the taxpayer admits yes, there is a fault on his part, and he pays 25% tax extra. Now, that subsumes penalty, that subsumes any sort of litigation which may happen. So, it is a win-win for both.
No further harassment once he's admitted that and paid the tax.
Yes.
All right. One more quick question on that before I turn to indirect taxes. You also did something which was very interesting today, where you said small cases, old cases, 20-year-old, some 10,000 rupee, 15,000 rupee demand which is cluttering up the system. Perhaps litigation is still continuing on that. The fact that you've said we're just going to bury all of that, and the fact that there are very strong statutory limitations now in taxes, so old matters are not being raked up. Speaking anecdotally to a large number of people, it gives them a lot of relief. It gives them a lot of comfort and satisfaction. Right. And this new step will, I think, also be hailed. I assume this is all deliberate actions to say, let's not be involved in years and years of litigation on small sums of money.
Litigation, grievances, the rectification, we don't have data, it means records, the taxpayer doesn't have record. Quite possible he has already paid the taxes at one point in time. We are, Income Tax Act is 1961, so it could be any demand. So it's a exercise, it's an exercise, cleansing exercise, which will give us some space to focus upon large demands, to do more meaningful job, and with limited manpower. And for the taxpayer, it's a harassment is taken away, means some sort of grievance which are generated, and the indirect benefit will be the taxpayer and we as well, that when the refund arises to the taxpayer, we say the old demand is pending, please pay up that demand, and it starts a rolling thing. So all these things will be going away, and the refunds process would be quicker, it will be not clogging the system. So I think innovative step has been taken by the government, and let us see how it moves ahead.
Right. So shifting now coming back to into indirect taxes and GST in particular. Now, GST, as with any radical new measure, would have some time for teething. But if you look at the sort of collections that are now starting to be reported on a fairly consistent basis, it's clearly a reform which is now paying off.
Yeah, on GST side, it's a combination of the policy measures which have been taken on the recommendation of GST Council, as well as use of the technology. As far as policy measures are concerned, everything is filed online. That is creating a huge, humongous database for the department. And the technology is used to make filing of returns easier for the taxpayer. Certain things are collated on the basis of suppliers' returns and shown to the taxpayer. So, this is the way technology is being used. Apart from that, e-way bill data, RFID data, that also comes to the tax department, and that gives an insight on how the things are playing out. And department is again using that nudging approach, and in case there is a mismatch, so taxpayer is intimated about the mismatch, so that they can do the rectification on their own, and that is the burden on the department also, because if they rectify on their own, there will not be any need to point it out by the department, and then issuance of show cause notice, adjudication, all those things are avoided. So this is the way that there is a humongous growth in GST revenue, as well as in the compliance levels are going up, and now presently the return filing, GST return filing is about 90%. So by any standards, world standards, this is a very good compliance level as far as return filing is concerned, and department is using the data which is coming to it from the filing made by the taxpayers or from the other sources like income tax data about the TDS deduction, etc., is also shared between the two departments, and that is also helping us in doing the data analysis and finding out where the tax has escaped. So that is pointed out and then is recovered.
Right. When you look at some of the possible next steps in the reforms, I know this is an interim budget and there's a full roadmap coming up in the July budget. But there would be still some people who say further reforms would be required even in GST. For example, is it possible at some stage to have 3 slabs so it becomes easier to comply, less headaches? Presumably that is work that will continue to be in process and maybe considered.
I would say that although 6 years have passed and GST has stabilized, that is reflected in the revenue growth, but still is work in progress. Many new steps are being taken to streamline or further bring transparency in the entire process, and that is helping. And in fact, on rate rationalization, GST Council has set up a GOM group of ministers committee to look into the tax rates, and that committee they made certain recommendations some time back to the GST councils. Those changes have been carried out, but mostly those were related to inverted duty structure. But now looking into the entire gamut of the tax rates, now this GOM has recently been reconstituted, and this GOM will look into the tax rates. Maybe after the elections they will thoroughly go through this tax rate structure and may make certain recommendations to GST council. So let us wait for that.
Right. You know, when it comes to people who, I'm sure there's still some people who are trying to stay out of the GST net, or for that matter, the income tax net as well. People still filing fake invoices and thinking they can escape. Those gaps will increasingly get shut. I'm just curious as to how much of that exercise has been done, and how close are we to the level where most people, or a fair number of people, are actually now complying and filing the correct invoices and paying the correct taxes. Because from that point onwards, then it will become, taxes will grow at the level that you know, the GDP is growing and the economy is growing at some point. Yeah,
towards that, department is looking into the GST return structure, and in fact there was a public consultation in that, and lot of suggestions have been received. And because now in GST return there is certain information which taxpayer has, but if he does not disclose in his return, it may escape his attention also, and that may lead to non-compliance on his part. So GST return is being recasted, and maybe at some point of time it will go before the GST council. Once that tax return format is notified, that will further lead to better compliance level. As far as you mentioned about the fake ITC, on that also the registration process has been tightened, and in fact some time back this Aadhaar based, this biometric based Aadhaar authentication for GST registration has been introduced in some states on pilot basis, and that also helped in weeding out the entities fake who are trying to take the registration on the basis of maybe some stolen identities of somebody else, or being tried to being created only for the purpose of seeding fake ITC in the GST ecosystem. So all these measures are helping in keeping these fraudsters away from the GST ecosystem, and department is driving or has undertaken a special drive against fake ITC fraudsters. And in recent months, a concentrated drive has been launched to bust the syndicates and arrest the masterminds, so that they are taken out of the system. In fact, I can mention that after the introduction of GST, something like 1,42,000 crores amount of fake ITC has been detected, and something like 1,300 arrests have been made by the Central Tax Department to weed out this fake ITC.
Wow, that's and on the direct side, are most people who should be in the tax net now in the tax net, or it's still work in progress? You know, halfway complete, 2/3 of the way complete.
See, the legislative changes which we have brought out are quite comprehensive, and because we have given emphasis thrust upon the TDS provisions and TCS provisions, try to bring more and more activities in that way through TDS or TCS. So in that context, if you see the deductions which are made are around 12 crore, means either advance tax is paid or tax deduction is made is around 12 crore, and we are getting around 8.5 crore returns of income. So that is the gap one can say about the filing of the return of income. And if I see the data of the financial transactions which we capture from reporting entities, from banks or financial institutions or stock exchanges, so that data is around 15 crore pence, unique pence. So the financial data captured is around 15 crore, the deduction of tax or payment of tax has been made is at around 12 crores, and return filing is around 8.5 crores. So, that is the metrics as of now. And each person who is financial transactions reported will not be in the tax net definitely. Likewise, some of the taxes are deducted for some transaction which one has undertaken, but does not like to file the return of income. So, in that perspective, the gap is not large.
Okay, it's certainly a fast improving situation, and let's hope that buoyancy continues, and look forward to speaking to you again after the full budget, and we'll see what actually happens out there. But thank you so much for joining us with that very, very special insight.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to slip into another break, but a lot more still to come. You're watching Sansad TV. I'm Vikram Chandra. I'll be back in just a few minutes.